So hi everyone, I'm Natalie Irwin, Director of Stakeholder Engagement here at Efficiency Canada, for those that don't know me. Welcome back to another Friday Discovery session. I trust that everyone heard about yesterday's announcement by Trudeau, the one about $2 billion going towards energy efficiency retrofits through the Canada Infrastructure Bank. Pretty exciting news. If that's not reason to celebrate with a pumpkin spice latte, I really don't know what is. But seriously though, I did want to take this opportunity today to thank everyone that signed our letters of support on this idea and others. And also those that took the time to call their elected officials to just share your story about working in energy efficiency and why you feel it's important and the government should invest it. This is actually a great example of what we can achieve together when we work together. So our voices are truly stronger united. So thank you again. This is a result of not just Efficiency Canada success, but our whole sector. So thank you. So let's get started. For those that are new, we ask that you save your questions to the end. We have 20 minutes for Q&A period, so there's lots of time to get to pretty much everyone's questions after our guest speaks for approximately 20 minutes as well. And a reminder that we have a pretty hard stop at 12:45 Eastern time, so everyone can go out and get that pumpkin spice latte. So please join me in welcoming Jonathan Hudson, Regional Director of Conservation Programs at Ecofitt Corp, who will speak on how we can meaningfully bring energy efficiency to remote communities. Welcome, Jonathan, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Natalie. Great to be here. Okay, so I thought I would jump right into the presentation with a slide on all of the remote communities across Canada. So I pulled this from the Natural Resources Canada Remote Communities Energy Database, which is a great resource. If you haven't checked it out, I included a link down there. So this is just a visual of all the communities, remote communities classified by Natural Resources Canada. And I believe right now there's 276. So I think this was higher in years past. I think in 5-10 years ago it was around 290 or 190. But it's been coming down a little bit just with a few communities relocating or being abandoned. So if you want to check out the link and the data, it's really cool. You can export it, you can play around with it. But if you dig into the data a little bit, two things become very apparent when you're looking at the data. Number one is that the majority of remote communities are diesel powered, so very high, GHGs associated with this. And number two is that the majority of these communities are Indigenous communities, so that's 61% are Indigenous communities. So that's mainly where I'll focus the discussion today. There's some of those communities that have hydro and wind power, and there's a good chunk that are non-Indigenous. But when we're talking about energy efficiency projects in remote communities, this tends to be where we really where we zero in on and where the greatest need is. So even zeroing in a little bit onto diesel and Indigenous communities, this is still a topic that you could spend a day going over and still not scratch the surface. So I'm just going to touch on 4 things today, try to keep it very brief. Program launch and design of remote projects, the added value that these projects can bring to communities, some of the unique risks that you encounter, and then some of the partners and allies that we use along the way. And I'll be speaking mainly to 2 projects. So Ecofitt, we do a lot of different remote community work across the country, but these are the 2 projects that I'm most directly involved with. So the first is the Remote First Nation Pilot Program. This is an ISO program in Ontario, and the other one is the Remote Community Energy Efficiency Program with Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro. So I'll just give you a little bit of information on these 2 projects. First, for the Remote First Nations Pilot Program. Again, this is an ISO-funded program. One of the really important stakeholders, partners on this program is the Anishinaabe Nation, which oversees, I believe, 48 First Nation communities in Northern Ontario. And this particular project involves 4 First Nation communities. So it's Satchko Lake, Winneman, North Caribou, and Casablanca. This project only launched late 2019, so it's been very interesting because the majority of this project has been taking place over the pandemic. It's community-wide. It includes residential and non-residential upgrades, and includes basic measures, like your light bulbs and water measures, weatherization, appliances, and it also has a really significant budget for health and safety, so about $2,000 per home, which is really nice to be able to add that component into this project. The other project that I'll be speaking or referring to is the Remote Community Energy Efficiency Program with Enel Hydro. One of the notable stakeholders with this is Nuances Regional Government, which is the group of Northern Inuit communities. There's also Nuanatuavut. There's Nunatsiavut, which is Northern Inuit communities, and then Nuanatuavut, which is Southern Inuit communities. A little bit confusing, but both have been engaged to some degree on this project. The scope of this project is a little bit more. So it's 21 diesel systems across 42 communities, including the island and Labrador. Now this project has been in market for quite some time. Started 2011. There was a pilot before that, 2010. Again, community-wide, residential and non-residential, and the measures or upgrades that are included in this project include, again, basic measures and weatherization, so insulation and whatnot. There's also a retail component, and there's also more and more work happening around demand response with this project. So let's jump into program launch and design, and just a few tips on this. So number one, if you're getting into one of these projects, one of the first things that's really valuable to do is to try to determine how the energy efficiency project fits into each stakeholder's goals and objectives at an early stage. Timing will change on this a little bit, but it's a good conversation to have before you launch the project. And this is going to change stakeholder to stakeholder what you're measuring against. So, for example, communities are probably going to be measuring against community energy plan. Utilities are going to be looking at their annual savings targets. If there's a federal or provincial government, they're probably looking at GHG reductions. So good example of this, I was involved with facilitating a low carbon economy project a couple of years ago between Nuances Regional Government, Enel Hydro, and the provincial government of Newfoundland and Labrador. And one of the first documents that we set up was a very brief document. I think it was 2 or 3 pages, but it had a table in it with all the benefits of the energy efficiency project, and how they achieved some of the objectives of each stakeholder. So for Nuances government, they have developed an energy security plan that they're working toward. For Enel Hydro, it was their annual savings targets, and then for the provincial government, they were, again, low carbon economy funding, so they were going against that criteria and trying to quantify the GHG reductions. Next tip is, make sure that you plan time to engage with the community before program launch. And when I say engage, really, this is time where you're just kind of spending listening to community members, less so telling them about the project, but more so just kind of having an open conversation with them where they can share with you whatever they want. So I've included some pictures of a trip we did with the ISO project. This was a launch trip that we did in March of this year, just before the pandemic got really bad. And this was the first day of that trip. And we only had 5 days together in Satchko Lake, where we brought together our team and each of the community's teams. But we felt it was important for that first day to be spent with just sharing. So it was really nice. We had the chief start us off, and then we had an elder open things up with a prayer and a bit of a ceremony. And then we just, we didn't have much of an agenda on that day. It was just counselors sharing. A lot of the day was spent talking to Pauline, she was the counselor in charge of housing in Satchco Lake, and just listening about the challenges that they've been facing, what kind of obstacles she deals with on a day-to-day basis, and how we can start kind of integrating some support into the project we were delivering to help her out. And that really set the tone, not just for the week, but for the entire project. So really, sometimes timelines are tight, but really try to plan in, enough time to engage with the community. When we start these projects, we usually try to get a 360-degree view of the community as quickly as possible. And by that, I mean, we try to build out an energy profile of the community. So I've attempted to represent this in a bit of a diagram. So we kind of use a funnel approach where we cast a very wide net to start out with, and then we kind of zero in on the worst culprits, the greatest opportunity. And we, ideally, this has worked well for us, but this might be over a few years. So, year one might be where you do a basic direct install with a survey, and you try to do this with 100% of the community. Now, you're never really going to get 100%, but it's interesting in these communities, you usually can get really high participation levels, between 70 and 95%. And this is why you're able to get a 360 view of the community in such a short period of time. It probably takes a couple local staff, maybe a month or two to audit and install in 200 homes. And then all of a sudden you have this great set of data that you can start to work with. So we take that data, start analyzing it. If possible, we get utility data that we can add to that. And then we kind of look at what we can do in year two and zero in on the next opportunity. So this is probably moderate upgrades and appliances. And then we're probably also doing a second tier of auditing a little bit deeper, probably something along the lines of an enter-guide audit. And then we take that and again, go down to deeper retrofits. And we just kind of, cycle this process. So this changes, with every community slightly, but, this is more or less, if you're starting a new community, greenfield, a strategy that has worked really well for us. Couple tips on achieving this 360-degree view and building out your data. So start with a really solid survey. You want to include building envelope information, appliances, plug load, something that's really interesting to build in at an early point that you might not think about is behaviors and attitudes. We were lucky to include this at a very early year in the NL Hydro program. It's been really interesting to see the change year over year with behaviors and attitudes towards energy efficiency projects. You also want to have a good non-residential or commercial survey that's slightly different. Step one, when you're in the community and trying to build out this data, is to develop a master list. That's what we call it. So this is just a list of all of the buildings and homes in the community. And the starting point for this list can vary significantly community to community. Some communities you might go in like, yep, we got a full list. Our housing department has that information, and we've done a bunch of audits. And you're like, great, you're off to the horses, we're off to the races. Other communities, they might not have that information. They might not even have civic addresses. So it changes quite a bit, but that's what you want to do. Once you have a master list, your local staff can use it to start, tracking what they've done through the community, and then that eventually becomes the foundation for the database that you're going to build out. Third tip, begin the process of securing utility billing data early. If the utility happens to be a partner of the project, it might be an easy process. Sometimes if they're a partner, it's still a lengthy process. If they're not a project partner, you might not have that information available at all, or it could be a very long process to get that information. So next area that I wanted to touch on is the added value that comes with remote community energy efficiency projects. I'm sure all aware of the added value of energy efficiency, but this is even more so the case in remote communities. To start, most of the people in these communities are typically living below the poverty line, and there's a lot of energy poverty throughout these communities. So any action that you're taking is a good chance it's going to be addressing energy poverty. Hand in hand with that is trying to do health and safety measures as part of your work. If you're going into homes in a community and you're installing lights and water measures, it's a fairly small additional cost to do a little bit of health and safety work that could benefit the community. So this could be something like as simple as collecting information that you pass back to the housing department. It could be installing some smoke detectors, or taking measurements from wood stoves to make sure they're safely distanced from combustible surfaces. So this is something small that you can usually add in at almost low, minimal or no cost that can add a lot of value. Another thing is building demand response capabilities. So this is something we've been doing more and more with NL Hydro. So we've done a lot of work there with conservation, trying to save KWH, but they also have a real challenge in some communities with winter peak. So one of the things we've done there is we've installed smart thermostats, MESA high voltage smart thermostats, on the basis of their energy savings, but where they're smart thermostats, we're also able to enable them for demand response events that NL Hydro can then, turn down the temperature of these smart thermostats a few degrees, and that can help avoid blackouts or service interruptions for the community. So this is something that's you can, again, easily tack into these programs that adds a lot of value. Another interesting one is shifting attitudes toward a future away from diesel power. So to give a little bit of context on this one, Nicholas Mercer, who was a researcher with the Shared Future, he did some interesting research in Labrador as part of his PhD on renewable energy. And one of the things he found is that a lot of people in these communities have a strong affinity for diesel power and a little bit of a reluctance to move away with it. And when you start looking at it, diesel has a lot of positive benefits to the community. Diesel plant operators are good, high-paying jobs. There's a lot of services based around the diesel plant, from plowing out the road to the diesel plants, to maintenance, to shipping, whatnot. And then there's some really interesting ones, such as people reported having a comforting feeling at the low hum that the diesel plants generated. They kind of had a familiarity of home with the diesel plants. So if we want to eventually transition these communities off of diesel, energy efficiency projects are a great way to take some baby steps towards that direction. We can start to introduce new technologies. We can start to help people identify as energy champions and better position them for this, future pivot. Last one, skills and training. We try as much as possible to add skills and training to the community. So, if we're doing a project, it obviously has a set end date, but we're trying wherever we can to add transferable work skills that can carry on in the community. So unique risks. I think the risks and the nuances and the logistical challenges of these projects is really the main area where it deviates from conventional energy efficiency projects, because when you look at conventional projects, a lot of the measures that you're installing and the models are the same, but it's really navigating around the risks and the challenges that's the main difference in these programs. So I've just put a fairly short list. This is not exhaustive by any means, but but I thought I'd go through some of these. This kind of gives you a taste of what it's like to work in these communities. So for starters, transportation. So if we go back to the maps I showed you at the beginning of the presentation, you probably noticed that, a lot of the communities were by water, some of the communities were inland. If a community is by water, chances are you have a boat or a ferry that connects with that community. That's your main way of getting product and equipment into the community. If that's the case, you're usually waiting for ice to melt at a certain point of the year. Usually this happens around May or June or July in a really bad year. With the inland communities, it's actually the opposite. So with the inland communities, you have ice roads, and your shipping season is usually February, March. Ice roads have been becoming a bit of a challenge due to climate change. The available time you have to ship is getting shorter and shorter. So a little bit on the transportation issues. Another thing that's interesting in these communities is the scheduling around seasonal activities. So people in these communities have very subsistence-based, living off the land lifestyle, and you have to take that into account. I'll give you a couple quick examples. So in Labrador, late July, early August is bake apple season, and I'm assuming most of you are not familiar with bake apples, but it's a small berry, and I think it grows in Labrador and maybe part of Norway, and it's actually quite lucrative. So end of July, early August, everybody and their dogs are out picking bake apples, and it's going to be very hard to schedule any type of appointment. So we usually just kind of shut down operations at that point in time. Likewise, in Ontario, with our ISO project, we just got out of fall hunting season. So that was the previous 2 weeks, and we ramped down for that as well, because again, most of the community is out and about on the land. Another risk that you're going to encounter is limited capacity of local trades. In small communities, you're lucky if you have 1 or 2 electricians and various trades. And even luckier if they happen to have all their certifications and insurance. So this can be a real challenge unless you're relying on shipping in tradespeople to the community. We really try to put as much work into the community as possible. But this is a risk that we frequently try to turn into an opportunity and create training opportunities, including training opportunities for local people. Even better if you can find an opportunity to train youth or women in trades. Cellular and internet network is a huge challenge in these communities, or lack thereof. We at Ecofitt frequently use electronic forms, and the system we use a lot is almost a live system where the forms can feed into our database and we can see the results coming in live. That's not an option in these communities with the infrastructure that they have. So we get back to basics a lot with paper forms and kind of a lot more in-person activities than we would normally do. There's also a lot of social issues that you need to be aware of and sensitive towards when you're delivering these projects. Addiction and mental health issues are very prevalent. We had a situation this year, unfortunately, where one of our communities had a series of youth suicides, and we had to chose to cease operations for a few weeks while the community was mourning. So, it's very tragic, but it's the reality of these communities, and it's really important that you understand what's going on in the communities and that you can prepare for this. Another random one that I just thought I'd throw in there is roaming dogs. So we were in Sachico Lake. There are dogs all over the place, and these are not owned by anyone in particular. They're more kind of like communal dogs, and most of them, great, 95% of them are super friendly, and you just want to go up and hug them or whatnot. Bruce in the picture there took to a few dogs. But then there's a few dogs that were a little bit suspect and you had to be aware of. And actually one of our coordinators, not on this trip, but previously had a bad dog bite. So again, very unique risks in these programs that you don't normally encounter in other projects. A couple of tips on risk management. Try to have a pilot as long as possible, just to give you a lot of time for experimenting and flexibility, where you can kind of get a lay of the land and play around with what works. Also, try to leverage existing supply and distribution networks. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't try to build something from scratch. If there's something that's in the community that works, take advantage of it. A good example of this is our partnership with Northern Store. So Northern Store has a store in most, or Northwest Company has Northern Store in most northern communities. And they are excellent at getting product and equipment into the communities. They have their own airline. We've used them for sourcing appliances and storage and promotion within their store. So look in the community, see what's there, and take advantage of it. Next one is, I'm not sure that's more of a tip, but contingency planning can really only take you so far with these projects. And by that I mean, if you're one of those project managers that likes to have a risk management plan and detail out all the risks that you might encounter and what you're going to do when you encounter them, it's really hard to do that with these projects. There's so many unknowns, to quote Donald Rumsfeld. What I normally would suggest is, rather than really trying to anticipate all the risks, if you're used to putting a buffer into your project plans on your schedule and your budget, I would increase that buffer significantly, probably like 2 or 3 times what you would normally do for a project, just to account for all of the unknown risks that you're probably going to encounter. And the last one is super basic, but just as much as possible, keep things as simple as possible. So again, paper forms, you don't have good IT infrastructure, and simple marketing. You don't need the same kind of marketing that you would need in other locations. You can get by with some posters and some Facebook posts. It's a very small target audience. So that money that you might have spent on marketing another program can be better spent with products and services in a remote program. And then last point I wanted to touch on, I know I'm getting pretty close to overtime, but partners and allies. So with both of the programs that I mentioned, we rely extensively on strategic partnerships and allies. We are by no means an island with this work. So I just wanted to kind of acknowledge some of the partners that we work with and talk about the roles that they play. So we have Blue House Energy, Shauna Henderson, we've been using their training to help train local staff. Clean Foundation has supported us with youth education. Dunsky does our cost effectiveness calculations, so for TRC and PAC and RIM and all those fun tests. Economist supports our Newfoundland project with program design, as well as developing an evaluation strategy for the project. Then we have some great technical partners, HomeSoul and ThermalWise. HomeSoul is a service organization based in Atlantic Canada and Ontario. And Ross Elliott in particular has been instrumental in our Ontario program. He's been helping with training. He's currently developing HRV balancing training that we can then use to train local people. And ThermalWise has been a really valued partner with our NL Hydro project. So we use them a lot for some of the more complicated commercial energy audits. And they've also done a really cool service where we've used one of their staff to kind of do a little bit of hand holding with business owners in these communities and walk them through some of the applications for upgrades. So it kind of takes a lot of the intimidation out of that process. Simtech, one of our really good partners, we use the B360 platform. So when I refer back to the, trying to get that 360 view and bring all that data together, the B360 platform is typically the lens that we're looking at that through. And MISA, smart thermostats, I think that MISA is still the only high voltage smart thermostat on the market, and they've been very active with the Newfoundland and Labrador project. It's been cool because they've been involved with the project for a long time, probably about 4 years now. And when they started out, there's 3 guys in an incubator, and now I think they're the 5th best-selling smart thermostat on Amazon. So it's been really interesting to see their growth as they've still kind of helped with delivering on a lot of the project goals. Last 2 are very important allies, partners on this work. So Indigenous Clean Energy is one of our advisors, our main advisor with our ISO project, and they've helped with making sure that we're engaging and consulting with the communities in an appropriate manner. And we've also been able to take a lot of advantage of their Catalyst 2020 network, which is just an incredibly useful resource that spans across the country. A shared future, so I mentioned a little bit about Nick Merce and the research there, but just to give a little bit of information on that. A shared future, the acronym is Achieving Sustainable Health and Autonomous Renewable Energy Development. I think that's the acronym. I'll have to double check. This is a Canadian Institute of Health Research project that's been doing some really great work. It's led by Heather Castledon out of Queen's University, one of my old profs. And again, they've got a lot of researchers in Queen's and Dalhousie that have been a valuable asset for us. So, just wanted to quickly acknowledge them and basically say, Ecofit is behind the scenes with a lot of these projects. We're trying to put the communities and our clients first, but our partners are even more behind the scenes. But the success of these projects are just as much built on our partners and allies as it is with us. So I think I will stop there. Apologies for going a bit over time, but
no, that was great. That was very insightful. A lot of, especially for myself being someone that's always lived, for the most part, urban, there's a lot of great insights there that you shared. So thank you for that, Jonathan. Just a reminder to people, if they want to raise their hand and ask their question, I can unmute you so you can ask it yourself, or you're also open are welcome to use the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom screen. And just two quick things before I get to the Q&As here. Just on the It Takes a Village theme that we have going on today. Just a reminder to everyone that it's actually Energy Efficiency Day on October 7th. So if your organization has not signed up on our website yet, please do so. And if you can't find the link, just send me an email or send it to info@efficiencycanada.org. Encourage you. And what it is it's not a live or a virtual event. What it is, it's an event on social media, and we've created some images and suggested text for you to share on October 7th. And we're just trying to create a lot of noise around energy efficiency and just celebrate the day and that we enjoy working in it. So that's what we have done. There's over 700 companies signed up in the US, and we have close to 100 in Canada. So I'm looking forward to seeing all the posts on October 7th. And then the second thing I just wanted to note is, as well as the $2 million given federally to energy efficiency retrofits in Ontario, thanks to Nick at the ISO for pointing this out, is that Ontario also announced a new 4-year $692 million conservation framework to begin in January of next year, which is an example of another strong commitment to the value of energy efficiency. So it's great to see these announcements being made by the provincial and federal governments. So now I'm going to open up to Q&A. First question is from Katie, is Can you please speak more to how you collected and analyzed data on behaviors and attitudes? And did you work with a local social scientist?
No, we did not. We did not work with a local social scientist. And to be honest, I wasn't even involved with the original development of the questions. So we have a survey that we have administered. I think the first iteration of it was probably 2012, where these questions were asked. And they're asked almost at any opportunity that we can. So if we're in a home doing a direct install, or in a business, or doing an event in a store, we're trying to ask the questions of the survey that are appropriate. So sometimes we're taking a chunk of that survey out and asking it. The questions, I'm trying to think of them off the top of my head, would be very much like, what's your main motivator to do energy efficient upgrades in your home? Is it money? Is it to do the right thing for the environment? That's one of the questions. I think we have a rated question, like on a scale from 1 to 10. What is your feeling about energy efficiency in your community? Well, scale from 1 to 10. What is your feeling about this project? So those types of questions, and we've kept them. I think we might have added a few over the years, but it's really interesting because we've kept them very consistent. So again, going back to shifting attitudes on moving away from diesel, we've been able to see year over year that people have been getting a more positive impression of energy efficiency, and even a more positive impression of the utility as well, which is a nice bonus. But yeah, very, very interesting, and highly recommend adding those questions at the earliest opportunity.
Perfect. And we have another question here from Christy, is what kind of projects are part of your first layer of your direct install?
So normally this is a basic direct install, which would be, the community member would go to a home, and we, just to give a little bit more information there, we try to empower the local staff as much as possible. So other programs, we would usually use a call center to make appointments and schedule them out for the staff. For these communities, scheduling doesn't usually work a lot. People are kind of going and just kind of popping in whenever it's convenient, and it's really, in these communities, everybody knows everybody, so you're kind of leveraging these small social networks. But anyways, they would go in and likely install LED lighting, water measures, probably smart power bar. There's normally you would have minimal draft proofing measures. It also depends on the heating system of the home. So for NL Hydro, if it was an electrically heated home, we would be able to do weatherization measures, draft proofing measures. Unfortunately, if it wasn't, we would not be able to do it because that's outside of the mandate of the utility. So I'm not sure that answers your question, but
I think so. There's just a follow-up question that someone had about building envelope improvements. Mm-hmm. Are those also included, like windows and doors and insulation?
It can run the gamut. So if we're talking, weatherization, so to give you an idea of what we're doing in the ISO project, that first visit, it's fairly basic draft proofing. On the next level, we're moving into replacing windows, and we're not actually replacing windows. We're doing a plexiglass insert in the windows. That's a lot easier to do. We're not touching the heating systems a whole lot, but we do insulation work. So that's kind of the final level, and that is primarily blown-in cellulose in the attics.
Oh, I have a really great question here. Is do you ever encounter people refusing you to access, or your team access to their homes, or declining to participate, and how do you handle that, and how do you get them to say yes?
We do. Yeah, we absolutely do. So participation rates in these communities extremely high. Again, you know, we're usually getting between 90 and 95%. So this is unheard of for energy efficiency programs. You know, if you try to do that in a normal program, you know, you'd be lucky to get 5-10%. But for that small group that isn't interested in participating, I don't know if there is a way to force them to participate, and I don't think maybe that's not the right tactic to take. You know, we try to use the soft approach, and if someone's not interested in the services, you know, that's their choice. So I'm not sure how to convince them, but I guess the answer to that question is we don't aggressively try to make people do the upgrades. Usually it sells itself, and probably the easiest way is, you know, if someone's on the street and they see that all of their neighbors have got the upgrades done, they don't want to be left out. So we really try to probably leverage those social norms and community-based social marketing to apply that pressure. But again, this is done in as soft a way as we can. We don't try to bash people over the head with energy efficiency.
Would you say that's more the case of having like the neighborhood or your friends are doing it to approach in rural communities as well?
Yeah, I mean, it works on itself, right? And that's the thing with these communities where they're so small. When you get to a certain level, it just takes off. Like, you know, everybody wants to participate. So it has that natural, you know, adoptive social norms effect in these communities, much more so than in other situations. If you were looking at neighborhood and in an urban setting where people, I guess, are a little less connected and less aware of their neighbors.
Okay, I know there are a few other questions, but I'm just aware of the time. So I'm going to be strict with everyone, including myself and Jonathan. I'm just going to wrap things up for today. So thank you, everyone, and thank you to Jonathan for joining us and for the insights and great questions and conversations. A reminder that we are actually not hosting a discovery session next Friday, because believe it or not, the Thanksgiving long weekend is here, and we know a lot of people take Friday afternoons off, so we will not be hosting a session, but we will be back on October 16th with Ian McVeigh, Manager of Sustainability from the Regional Municipality of Durham, and Lauren McNutt, a consultant of Dunsky Energy Consulting, who will be speaking about the role of municipal financing programs in accelerating climate action. So another great one in 2 weeks' time. Hope everyone enjoys their Thanksgiving next weekend, and look forward to seeing you on October 16th. Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, everyone. Take care.